Welcome back to the Alan Nathan Show. I'm John Hayward, Deputy National Security Editor of Breitbart News, sitting in for Alan today. Earlier in the broadcast, I mentioned that nobody ever really got held accountable for the IRS scandal, and that has become the template for the left, for the media, for Democrats to think that they can just bury scandals like that and outweight them until they die of old age. But that's not entirely true. There is a little bit of accountability floating around the IRS scandal. There are a few aftershocks that are still being felt. Here with us to talk about it is Mark Meckler, a political pundit, attorney, and business executive, president of Citizens for Self-Governance and Convention of States Action. Welcome to the Alan Nathan Show.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, doing well. It looks like a bit of karma has, in fact, caught up to a couple of people involved in the IRS scandal.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see. I mean, it is definitely just delayed, and it's not quite enough, but I think this is important. Everybody probably remembers the name Lois Lerner from the IRS scandal 10 or 12 years back, and she unfortunately retired with no consequences for the unconstitutional trampling on people's First Amendment rights. But Holly Paz was her direct assistant, and there are other people as well. And now a couple of them have apparently been put on. They're finally going to be terminated.
It's, like you said, justice delayed, which many people say is justice denied, but at least a little something is happening to people there. The IRS scandal is such a fascinating chapter because it was so blatant. People forget the whole thing began with Lois Lerner, who you mentioned, admitting that the IRS was politically targeting right-wing groups in the Barack Obama's election campaign. And then everything that happened after that was like a frantic attempt to obfuscate that they admitted the problem right up front and claimed that it was nonpartisan or just incompetence or something, not political activism. And that's pretty much how it died, down in the history books. It was just ignored to death until the story went away.
Yeah, I mean, and specifically what these folks did, so people remember, or some people maybe not even old enough to remember, they put together these lists called Be on the Lookout lists. And what that meant is if you filed for nonprofit status, if you were a local Tea Party group, for example, a local constitutional group, and your goal was to get nonprofit status, what's called a 501c3 or 501c4 status, your application was pulled from the pile if your name was Tea Party in any way, if your name was constitutional in any way, if your name was conservative or America-loving in any way, you would have been pulled from the pile based on what they call Be on the Lookout list, BOLO list, and then you would be slow-walked. And not just slow-walked, but the process itself was intended as the abuse. You would receive a list of 30 or 40 questions. Literally, in order to reply to those questions, it would take bankers' boxes full of documents and materials. And virtually nobody who went through that process ever got approved.
And the slow walking is the part that always got me. This is something that was happening when I first became a pundit, so it was a big story on the radar. And it was so fiendishly clever how they wouldn't just flat out deny your tax-exempt application as a political group. They would just put you into purgatory. They would never say no, but they would never say yes. And that left their victims with very little they could do. They couldn't file appeals because they weren't outright denied. They were just mom and pop Tea Party groups that withered away because they couldn't get their tax exemptions.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something really important. These were mom and pop Tea Party groups. They had no legal representation. These are people who were in just completely unfamiliar with any kind of process like this. They were doing what they thought they needed to do, what they were told to do by people that operate legally, and then they just got caught in the machine, and that was the intent. In fact, the goal was to stop the Tea Party groups from being as successful in 2012 as they were in 2010, and largely that scheme worked.
And, the accountability was so minimal because there were hearings, there were congressional hearings into all of this, and the Democrats basically rolled in on unicycles tooting clown horns and turned the hearings into ridiculous sideshows, and nothing came of it. The media said, nope, not newsworthy, nothing happening here, and that was basically the end of it, even though the actual material exposing those hearings were bombshell after bombshell about evidence being destroyed, about political corruption of the Internal Revenue Service. This should have had people marching in the streets with pitchforks and torches, but the Democrats did come up with a successful strategy to minimize the political damage and treat it like a partisan food fight.
Well, it's exactly the same as what they do today. So as I watch things unfold today in the latest scandal around the Russiagate hoax, the proof that has now come out around the Russiagate hoax, you watch the Democrats do the exact same thing. They call the proof the conspiracy now. So the same thing happened in the Tea Party days. You had all the proof come out. The IG reports had this happen, and then they called the IG report a conspiracy. So this is nothing new for Democrats. This is the standard operating playbook of the Democrat Party in America.
And it's a problem for people that want accountable government, because at some level, we want to think the government has the ability to investigate itself, to right wrongs that are committed like this, and that there should be some congressional oversight. And when all of that has been trashed, what are we left with? It's no wonder that people don't trust government anymore. And I would say the Tea Party scandal and the IRS scandal, that began a chain of events that culminated with COVID, with everything that happened during the coronavirus pandemic, and then with the effort to conceal Joe Biden's mental deterioration. And the result is a sizable chunk of the electorate that no longer trusts either the government or the media at all.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect analysis. Having lived through that Tea Party thing up close and personal, being the head of one of the largest Tea Party organizations in the nation, as all this other stuff started to unfold, I saw it exactly like you just described it. This is part of a long continuum. These are not individual events. This is actually the modus operandi of the Democrat Party in America. And the thing that bothers me about it is, look, I don't want either party to behave this way. I do not want the federal government targeting people for what their beliefs are. The left doesn't see it the same way. When the left has power, they see that all mechanisms of power should be used against their enemies to preserve their power. And that's a problem in this country for which I'm not sure exactly what the solution is.
And to reward their friends. And money is such a big part of politics. And when you look at what happened to the Tea Party, kitchen table, mom and pop, genuine grassroots activism, but those people didn't have a lot of money, so they couldn't hire flashy legal talent and PR firms and lobbyists in Washington. And they got crushed in no small part because a lot of people in the Republican Party wanted nothing to do with them and didn't want an exciting populist movement messing up their deal. And a few years later, a lot of that populist energy regrounded itself in Donald Trump's 2016 campaign.
Yeah, I think that's another spot on analysis that a lot of people don't connect the dots is Donald Trump is, I would argue, kind of the tail of the Tea Party movement. And what I mean by that is that it all led to Donald Trump. From the very beginning, it's not that he was a Tea Party guy or came directly out of the Tea Party movement, but he was the reaction he tried to do and then failed to do. One of the things that's important to point out about these individuals in the federal government that do these bad things that are Democrats is they get promoted for doing those things, and that's part of the problem.
As you pointed out, when it's Lois Lerner, she gets a comfortable retirement with all the money and privileges in the world. She never got punished for anything she did. So yes, you're exactly right. There is a power structure here, and that is what people want dismantled. And Donald Trump might be the best chance they've ever had to do real damage to it. Mark Meckler, political pundit, attorney, business executive, president for Citizens for Self-Governance and Convention of States Action. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Hayward, Deputy National Security Editor for Breitbart News. Thanks for joining us on this hour of the Alan Nathan Show.